Hi everybody, this is Tom and I'm here with Father Kelly, our pastor.
Good morning, everyone.
How are you? So Father Kelly, we've been meeting like this for the last couple of weeks and we've been getting a lot of questions from people.
Okay.
And a lot of people have been asking about services they may have heard of happening in other churches. So for example, there were some churches that did drive-through confessions and things like that. So what do you think about all that?
I would love to make every accommodation possible. I would love for us to be open and back to normal. And unfortunately, the reality is that we can't do that stuff. A lot of this, like the main thing we need to understand is the closures and everything really is, the governors and the CDC telling us the best thing for us to do is to, follow this plan for a certain period of time. But with that being said, going to your question, it's what are the ways that we can still, have some sort of normalcy. So we talked about, some people have asked about like parking lot masses, if we could do something like that, where people just drive up in their cars and, or even the same thing for confession. Any of those alternatives that we try to come up with in situations like this. And basically we've been told, not to. We've been told that you really shouldn't. We need to follow what, we're being told and what's coming down from the governors to sit there and say, try to respect this social distancing for a while. And it's unfortunate because, it makes sense to me. I can go out there on like the lift or something and, say mass and keep my distance and, we could do stuff like that. But, unfortunately, it's just, it's a reality we can't do at the moment.
Yeah, well, no, it makes from talking to you, one of the things that I've picked up on that you've missed is doing visits.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It's a time it's a troubling time. I got a call the other day for someone who was, passing away and not being able to go visit them in the hospital. Luckily, one of the chaplains was there, so they were able to see them. But it's incredibly tough because, again, that's what I signed up for. And, I had a good conversation with someone the other day who responded to me saying that for a home visit, and it was actually a chance for me to reconcile with this person and also to grow in all of this, to say, what can I do better? So I'm certainly grateful for that person to be open to the conversation and talk about it. And, for me, it's a moment of, what was I doing? What was I used to doing? What was my routine? And then what can I do better out of all of this? Which I think is really important because, I'm not perfect, I'm like everybody else, and we make mistakes, and, we try to sit there and say, okay, how can I do better? How can I do better for my people?
Awesome. Now, what if somebody is listening and they're used to Lent and they're used to doing things like going to reconciliation. In fact, this year you had expanded the availability for reconciliation, which of course that kind of got blown out of the water with all this.
Right.
But what if somebody wants to go to reconciliation and has that desire in their heart, but they just can't go right now? What would you say to them?
So what the church teaches is in these moments, what we can really do is with true contrition, we can go before God as if we are, right now, and truly say, I'm sorry. It's moments like that where we can be forgiven in that moment, and then at the same time, it's when, things are back open and we can get back into the routine of going to confession, that then we go. So it's like when they used to have general absolution services, it was kind of, this is intended for the moment, but until you make it to individual confession face-to-face with the priest. So in moments like this, it's kind of the best thing that we can do is, just take some time, close the door, pray and just say, God, I'm heartfully sorry for all the areas that I've fallen and the areas that I need to improve. And then, once we're able to go back to confession one-on-one, certainly that's where we bring it right there, and, we're good. We're good.
So somebody who's in that situation, their conscience should feel clear.
Yes,
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we always think of, God especially as a loving and merciful God. I can't imagine in situations like this where he's saying, no, that doesn't count. That's not true. That's not true at all. But with that, since we did expand it, and we were doing Wednesday nights, and there was a great response, we had originally planned to do that just for Lent, and then instead of doing the general service, one time where it didn't work for everybody. I think after this, what I'm looking to do is expand that. And, people have responded great on Wednesdays, for the evening, so let's just keep that going. And that's what I'm hoping to do. And of course we have Saturdays, and then anytime anyone calls, I'll drop anything, let's go. We'll sit down here in the chapel, and go through confession. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, I think a lot of people, they feel that there isn't a lot they can do. Normally, when they think of their church and they think of reaching out and things like that, they could come to the church and they could see people and do it in that way. But what would you say to them?
So I would start with this. We're sitting here in the chapel, and our chapel's open from 6 to 9. That's one of the best things that we can do to even just get out for our own, sanity, change of, scenery, and also to be able to feel like we are going to church. It's not in the same exact way, but it's certainly, we're in the presence of the Lord, in the tabernacle, and it's the best thing that we have to offer, especially in this moment here. But for isolation in general, we talked about various things for reaching out to folks, by phone calls or, if we have online access. But it's what's the best way, I think, that we can spend that time is really working on our prayer life and starting over, almost like starting from scratch, saying this is what I've always done, this was my routine, but now maybe it's time for me to kind of shake things up a little. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, I can't help but think, this is going to be the most different Holy Week
Yes.
that we've ever had.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts on what Holy Week is going to look like? What's it going to look like for you? And what can it look like for the people at home?
Well, certainly we'll be recording it and making it available on social media. Holy Week is going to be very different. I mean, Easter Sunday is our game day. It's our biggest day of the year, next to Christmas. So of course, Palm Sunday we would normally be either outside or in the parish center doing the procession in with the palms. We're not allowed to do that because we can't gather. So it's starting off with what are we allowed to do that gives people the certain normalcy of the rite and the ritual, but at the same time you're omitting the parts that you cannot do or don't make sense under the circumstances. So think of Holy Thursday, we would normally have the washing of feet, with 12 people. We obviously can't do that. So, we would be omitting that. For Good Friday, we would normally venerate the cross. Obviously we can't gather and do that. So how can we do that as far as participating in some way at home, seeing it online, but still being able to, venerate in a particular way? Like I've always preached for Good Friday about leaving everything on the cross. When you come up, we come up, we genuflect or we bow, and then, we kiss the cross. It's kind of like, how can I still leave everything there with the same intent, the same thing in my heart? Just like before when we talked about confession, doing that sort of contrition at home, you can make that same effort, or maybe even more so, because we're missing on what we're used to. The Easter Vigil is, of course, going to be very different because there won't be the Easter fire for the vigil, and we can't do the lighting of the candles. But certainly people can, light candles at home and kind of participate in that way of, celebrating the light of the world coming through. But it's very different, and it's not something that we can move. We can't just change the days and say, okay, we'll wait till we're reopened, and then we'll do the Triduum. So it's sad, but it's a hopeful time for us to recognize, here's everything I'm missing. Like, I'm wholeheartedly missing being in my routine of coming to church, of being able to celebrate Mass with the people, to be in community with others, to be able to, catch up, and interact and grow in your faith with people and make new connections. It's very different, but it's also, we look forward to it with anticipation, just like we look forward to the resurrection. And we get positive and we get hopeful. And we get filled with a joy that we really may have ignored before because we haven't been able to have this. So it's kind of the second that we're reopened, we sit there and say, like, this is going to be the biggest Sunday we're going to have. You know, it's Easter Sundays are our biggest in the liturgical year, but you know, that Sunday that we're going to celebrate it as if it's the first and only Easter we've ever had. You know, so
that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, as we're closing up, I just can't help but think that a lot of people have had some time to think and maybe even to unwind. So what have you been doing to unwind?
So my downtime, I'm an introvert at heart, and you know, it's one of those, it takes a lot for me to go out and be in front of the crowd and all that, and that's where I always say God has a sense of humor, being able to push myself to do it, and I feel comfortable, and I really enjoy it, and I love it now. So having that kind of, you know, changed, it's what are you doing with your time? So of course, I still pray like normal first thing in the morning, and I find throughout the day that there's other times that I try to take advantage of that as well, because I have a little more time stuck here like everybody else. But of course, I'm playing with the dog, so Haley's happy. You know, she gets to run a few more times a day, you know, by my side the entire time. I love listening to music. Music's a huge one for me, as far as it's always been something to build me up. And you know, depending upon the mood that you're in, you can listen to different things, but it can help you. And I find myself listening to music that we would normally hear Tom Green or Abby playing. You know, so there's Matt Maher and some other contemporary Christian stuff that it's all in hopes of when we get back to this, like I'll get to hear this live, you know, as part of, you know, our celebration of the Mass. Been doing a little bit of reading. You know, I always go back to certain books, at least a couple times a year for spiritual nourishment. My all-time favorite is The Great Divorce from C.S. Lewis, and I've talked about this numerous times during Masses. And if you don't have it, get it. Download it. I think it's free even on iPads, or that it's all about detachment and what we want to take with us. And I think even in this time period, we can look at it and say, like, if I read something like that, what am I holding on to that I really need to let go of in order to grow in my faith? So C.S. Lewis is always one of my favorites to go to. And then, of course, leading up to Holy Week, it's always the best time for us to look at the Passion. And there's a book by, I think his last name's Maloney, and it's called Love in the Gospel of John. And he just gives this entire different perspective of the Gospel of John and how much Jesus is in control, even in the moments that it doesn't seem like he is. So those are sort of the things I'm turning to, is, you know, try to pass the time, nourish myself at the same time, but also from all of it is, how can I then go and, you know, preach better? How can I serve better? How can I grow in my own faith in the meantime, and, you know, be able to share that with everyone after. So
it's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for sitting down with us.
You're welcome.
And we will see everybody soon.
Yeah. The only thing I would say that for the last thing is, if you have questions for us, certainly make the comments, you know, on any social media, or you can call us, email us, things that you wanted us to talk about, you know, interest things. If you're interested in more information about me, anything like that, you know, this is certainly a great time for us to do that. You know, if there's anything we could clarify or do, or you want to see in the future, you know, please let us know. Let us know how we can reach out to you better and serve you better, and that's what I got.
Awesome.
So,
sounds good.
So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.